We're going to follow a little bit of a different format for our meditation this morning and our class overall. Nothing too radical. I won't even preview what it's going to be, but just know it'll be a little bit different from what we typically do. Let's go ahead and settle into a comfortable meditation posture. As always, feel free to emulate the mountain as you settle into your meditation posture. Silent, still, with ancient awareness. And please gently, very, very gently bring your awareness to the exhalation of your breath. And allow your exhalation to be just a bit longer and a bit more pronounced than your inhalation. Please feel free to experiment with pausing briefly at the bottom of each exhalation. Settle and rest. Come to a place of stillness, both stillness of body and stillness of consciousness. Please gently redirect your awareness. Become aware again of your physical body. Allow your breathing to become less shallow. And when you're ready, please open your eyes and bring your meditation to an end. Thank you. So, in a minute, we're going to do a longer meditation on impermanence. But before we do, I wanted to provide a little bit of clarification, a little bit of context for the meditation that we're going to do. This is a meditation that I think most of you, maybe all of you, have done before with me. It is moment by moment phenomena are undergoing change. And then I cite the quote from the monk who says, "In my 20 years of wearing the robes of an ordained monk, I have learned this one fact: all that arises ceases. This I know." For me, it's a very powerful meditation. And in reading through our text, In Love with the World, I realized that there may be potential for us to misunderstand the meaning of those words. All that arises ceases. Um, it be understandable if we heard those words and interpreted them to mean that all that arises ceases, all that arises dies, like goes out of existence altogether. Actually, that quote from that monk is something that I read in an Eckhart Tolle text. The actual words of the Buddha when he taught impermanence were all that arises passes away. Not exactly what sutra that's cited in. Um, but important to know that when we say that all that arises ceases, that doesn't mean that all that arises ceases to exist. I think we could say all that arises ceases to exist as it is. It changes into something else, right? It's not going out of existence or dying as it were. It's just changing into ceasing to be what it is and is changing into something else. Same with the actual words of the Buddha, especially these words, all that arises passes away. Passing away in Western kind of nomenclature is code for dying, right? That's a polite way of saying when someone has died, we say that they pass away, or maybe not polite, maybe just a little less intense. All that arises passes away into something else. Implicit are those words. So, um, just want to read an excerpt from In Love with the World, where Yongey Mingyur alludes to this point. Um, I'm reading from, this is again in the chapter Impermanence and Death. I'm on page 28. And here, Eckhart Tolle, Yongey Mingyur, for those of you who are familiar with emptiness, makes a very close association, infers very skillfully that impermanence and emptiness, very, very close. Not the same set of teachings, not the same realizations, but very similar in their effect, the potential effect that it can have on our mind. So Yongey Mingyur writes, emptiness refers to the fact that things are not as solid and real as they seem. Something that we hold in our hands might appear completely solid and unchanging, but that's an illusion. Whatever it may be, it's changing all the time. And when we investigate, we find change and fluidity where before we assumed permanence and solidity. This does not make the phenomenal world nothing, the word nothing italicized. This doesn't make the phenomenal world nothing. At the same time, its essential nature is not what we usually think it is. I think that's enough. That's enough for now. So I want to do the meditation, lead us through the meditation on impermanence, wisdom realizing impermanence, with this recognition now that all that arises ceases. Ceasing does not mean ceases to exist. It dies completely. Actually, there is no complete death, really. There's just a change, just a transformation. So why don't we settle in for meditation with that sort of backdrop and see if we have a different sort of experience with our meditation on impermanence. Okay. Once again, please drop down into a comfortable meditation posture. And when you're ready, please gently transition into meditation on the inner body. Become the silent observer of sensations that may start in your hands and your feet in the form of a tingling, perhaps a lightness, perhaps a heaviness, perhaps a pulsation. Moment by moment, phenomena are undergoing change. It's not that things change or that things will change. It's that things are in the process of changing moment by moment by moment. The people sitting in meditation right now are not the same as the people who entered the room to meditate a few moments ago. Meditation on impermanence is an extremely powerful method of overcoming the painful and sometimes harmful mind of desirous attachment. That's because if you recognize that your object of attachment is in the process of changing, dissolving, and disappearing, that means that the basis of the mind of attachment is also necessarily changing, dissolving, and disappearing. Please know this truth about impermanence. If you perfect your practice of wisdom realizing impermanence, you will never suffer again in this lifetime. A monk once made the following statement. He said, "In my 20 years of wearing the robes of an ordained monk, I have learned this one fact. All that arises ceases. This I know." So now, now I'd like you to please just rest in the wisdom that recognizes the impermanence of all products. All that arises ceases. Become one with this truth. All of the things that we grasp at and cling to, having a good reputation, being praised, sense pleasures, material resources, all of the things that we grasp at and cling to with our minds of attachment are in the process of changing, dissolving, and disappearing. Ask yourself, how much sense does it make for me to cling to and be attached to things that are in the process of changing, dissolving, and disappearing? All that arises ceases. Please rest in this truth. The great 11th century yogi Tilopa gives us the following advice: thoroughly examine mundane things or things of the world. If you do, you will see that none of them persist, none of them are capable of permanence. And in that sense, they are like dreams and magical illusions. Dreams and magical illusions are meaningless. Therefore, generate renunciation and abandon mundane concerns. Now, please gently redirect your awareness. Become aware again of this impermanent collection of parts we've agreed to label physical body, and allow your breathing to become less shallow. Taking deeper and deeper breaths, become aware again of the impermanent garments of clothing resting on the surface of physical body. Become aware again of the surroundings inside the room that you're occupying. Deeper and deeper breaths, and become aware again of the world that exists outside of the room that you're occupying. Become aware again of clouds, of blue sky beyond the clouds, of outer space beyond the blue sky. And we dedicate all of the positive energy, all of the merit from this morning's meditation to world peace. May all beings without exception be completely free from all forms of emotional and physical suffering. May all beings without exception soon come to have a direct experience of the wisdom realizing impermanence. May all beings without exception be happy, peaceful, contented, and free. Completely fill up your belly and lungs with air, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes and bring your meditation to an end. Thank you very much. So, a little qualifier about our practice of impermanence. Um, Probably best for us to start with more moderate, more mm, gentle, less consequential objects of our attachment. Like, let's not start with our beloveds, our children and our partners. And yeah, maybe we start with things like screens, right? Or maybe our favorite coffee cup or teacup, right? I want this teacup for myself and I'm going to leave this other one for somebody else, or, whatever it might be. Bicycles, attachment to bicycles, that's a good one for yours truly. I'm not looking at anyone in particular except myself. Um, so let's start gentle with gentle objects, maybe garments of clothing. That's probably a good one. Yeah, yeah. Um, Before we close, I just want to share something with you a little bit off topic. I had the pleasure of taking a weekend getaway with my sweetheart to Tucson. And on the way back, we listened to a podcast called The Telepathy File, the telepathy tapes, as in like reading one's mind, right? That sort of telepathy. And what this podcast said, I'm not an expert on it. I've listened to all of 1.5 episodes of the podcast, but essentially what they are demonstrating and documenting is that autistic children who are incapable of speech, there are lots of these children who have telepathic powers. Yeah, they can read, they can read the minds of others. So they did a bunch of different scientific experiments, and my skeptical mind, right? I'm not proud of this skepticism, but my mind says, as my sweetheart Wind told me about this podcast that she had listened to, I said, what are the credentials of the person who's hosting the. Turns out she's a neuroscientist at Johns Hopkins. So, okay, she's got credibility, at least insofar as credentials go. But anyways, all of these different experiments in like a clinical setting, like randomized numbers coming up on this random number generating machine, a person close to the child would read this number and hold it in their mind, and the child would say the number that was in the person's mind, in a separate room, separate zip code, didn't matter where they are. The person would read the book, would be reading a book, then look at the page number. The child would be able to tell what the page number was. look at, reading a certain sentence from the page of the book, the child would say what the sentence said. Just amazing stuff. One thing that I thought was really noteworthy, all sorts of things I don't understand, like why does it seem to be only children, autistic children, who are incapable of speaking? Like, why is that? That seems to be a pattern. I don't know the answer to that. Something else that was really that they started to bring up, a pattern that they identified, was that the child could only do it with someone he or she was close to, like their mother, like their mother. Tried to do it with the father in one example, who was skeptical of this, didn't work. So for me, that kind of speaks to heart connection. That's just an aside to an aside, for this whole thing is kind of an aside. But what I think is really important for our purposes in this is not to say, cool, telepathy is powerful. How much fun would that be as a party trick? Blow my friends away with this. No, it's not about that, of course. It's yet another example of the power of consciousness, right? I mean, we meditate over and over on the fact that and discuss that brain is not mind, right? Consciousness, mind, synonyms for our purposes. Consciousness is not confined to the envelope of our skin. This shows pretty conclusively that yet another conclusive example that consciousness is indeed not confined to the envelope of our skin. And consciousness has great potentials and great powers that heretofore we might have had limiting beliefs about, or questions or doubts or whatever. As I was listening to this podcast, some of my teacher's favorite words kept coming back to me. Ordinary appearance is the root of all suffering. Ordinary appearance is the root of all suffering. So I say, let's abandon these limitations, these limited notions that we have about the potential for our mind and the potential of our consciousness. What we're here doing is training our mind and, developing telepathy. That's all nice and so forth. But if this potential to have telepathic capabilities is possible, then it's absolutely possible for us to use the power of our consciousness to overcome the delusions of anger and attachment and ignorance and achieve full awakening. That's the real takeaway for me, same as it ever was. The path is always leading to that complete liberation from all forms of suffering, which means complete liberation from the root delusions of anger, desires, attachment, and ignorance. So thanks for indulging me with my story about the telepathy tapes. If you guys, some of you might not be familiar with podcasts and how they work, I'd be happy to do one-on-one tutorials with you and show you where you find. I listen to it on Spotify, but I'm sure it's available on lots of other podcast sources. So, okay, you guys have a great day. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
You're most welcome. Yeah.